Welcome to Ara History Untold, where you'll learn from my mistakes, pick up some tips and tricks today, and go away winning more games. Let's roll. Let's kick things off with a nice easy one to begin with, growing some solid foundations. This is your first turn, as well as growing a region. Make sure you've filtered to all kinds of projects so that you can see improvements, as well as the settlers that we will return to in a future tip. Mainly you'll be focusing in on farms here for early food and growth, though a workshop or two will be handy as well, as these can craft materials and ultimately fuel growth too. We'll return to those in a moment. Finally, a note on dwellings: you may not need one to begin with. Growth is slow, and you might have plenty of capacity for more population, though you will want to build a dwelling in your city centre to get extra bonuses out of it. Speaking of bonuses, this region has a wonderful amount of food, meaning I can build a farm anywhere. It doesn't matter if the specific area is large or small. By the way, the yield is the same. Lastly, we do want to produce some feasts, as these will be crucial for early growth. So let's move in now and talk about number 2, Crafting 101, goods and amenities to fuel rapid development. Here you can see the default hearth is producing a feast. However, it's going to take a whopping 46 turns, and I don't have that long to wait. We can speed up any crafting production by adding supplies, which we can produce, or experts, who we'll return to later. Crucially though, early on, I recommend at least, filling up these extra slots to try and accelerate the production of your crafted goods and amenities. The feast, throwing a whole load of money at it, why not? We start with plenty, I'm still making money per turn, has significantly changed the production. Now the feast is being produced in but 5 turns. Once it's produced, by the way, an amenity can be assigned just like this to a city, in this case providing extra growth, food, and happiness. And here you can see the before and after. The extra happiness and extra food, very obvious. Given enough time, this will help the city grow. We should focus in on all of those quality of life improvements though, that you can see over here on the left at any time. Increasing prosperity, for example, will make me more money, and I can then use that to produce even more goods more quickly. Happiness is also vital for city production, whereas things like health will directly impact growth. And growth is important thanks to these city tiers. You'll note that a growing city will pick up more regions and increase all kinds of other yields. Now let's shift focus and talk about actually settling a city in the first place. You should do this early, often, and always, I recommend, up to your capacity. Settlers are relatively cheap. You can march them across the land very easily and then pick out a zone. Ara History Untold does a great job at showing you what's a good zone, what's a bad zone, and when you click into this detail, where it's focusing on how many territories are available, how much space, how close you are, and the yields, you'll get an overall rating. Don't forget to combine the many tips in this video together, like throwing a feast in straight away to get the city growing as rapidly as possible, and develop some special industry. But who's actually settling? Let's go back in time and talk about the civilizations and leaders. While I can't concretely say which ones are best and worst just yet, there are a few crucial things you need to know. On the right-hand side of the screen is where all of the vital information is. You'll see the unique trait to your civilization and leader, as well as a variety of other traits. If we look at George Washington here, for example, Georgie boy has 5. However, they're not always positive. You'll note that the first trait, ambitious, actually reduces the turn duration of golden ages. However, more often than not, these will be generally positive benefits. The specific trait should also be looked into carefully. Here, a whole load of extra city health by the man killer might help you grow fast early on, while a more aggressive take from China will kit you out with the red militarism. Moving through, let's talk about the 3 principles of expansion: space, yield, and resource. These are my 3 key driving factors whether I'm conquering new land or expanding outward. As your city grows, you'll continue to expand, so this stuff's very important throughout the whole game. Take a look at Singleton here. It has 4 different areas within the region where I can build. That, generally speaking, is going to make it much more attractive than Armadale over here, which only has 2. Generally, stay clear of that. That part should be obvious. You'll also, of course, want to focus in on the resources. What do they do? Can you harvest them? And do you need them? The rice here, for example, I can make most benefits from it already, though I do need another technology. Likewise with fishing, I'm a little bit behind here, so I won't be able to get the full benefit and the goods that these tiles can produce. Other resources can be harvested early on and improved, like gemstone, so as you're expanding, don't just look at the space and the yield of a tile, but also the neighboring ones. The yield here, by the way, very straightforward. If it's got lots of food, build farms. If it has lots of logs, you might want to build a logging camp. This stuff is fairly obvious, but specializing these regions is not. Likewise, make sure you rush projects using a pretty low amount of wealth to speed up a lot of production. Now let's talk specialists and experts, building on what we've just discussed, specializing cities and adding experts to tiles. As your city grows, pick up more regions, you'll also grab these handy little experts, and you can assign them to any specific tile within a region. Generally speaking, it will obviously increase the production of that tile, and the game will tell you right here on the farm, plus 150% harvest production, giving me more food for doing basically nothing. It will also change the maintenance just slightly. I would argue that these specialists are better assigned perhaps at something early on like the butcher shop, which provides a great amenity for our cities. This one can be sped up tremendously. Currently taking 13 turns, I'll be able to cut that in half. And if I build more industry here, by the way, they'll get bonus production too. So it's not just about adding experts, but also specializing your regions. The granary, another great example for food and a little bit of city health. Combine these factors of specialized regions with improvements that really benefit one another and increase your goods production, and your city's amenities will just be off the charts. It'll help your growth, it'll help your combat strength, it'll help the money that you make. All of it is locked behind this key crafting loop and how you use the specialists, the resources, and the principles of expansion that we've already discussed. Let's change tact a little bit now and talk about those killer acts, and also the prestige and act transitions that come with them. This will happen twice throughout your game, at the end of Act 1, and then again at the end of Act 2. And nations at the bottom, those with the least prestige, will be knocked out of the game. You get this handy little look in, by the way, at each chance, so you can kind of check how you're doing compared to others. And of course, the prestige overview is vital. You can see areas where you're doing really well, lots of points from quality of life that we were talking about before, and industry, my production strength here, off the charts. You can also, by the way, constantly monitor these. It's not just at the crucial change of the act where you might get booted out, but also more generally throughout the game. Up in the top left, you can check at any time. Info, standings, statistics, and prestige. I wouldn't really worry too much. I made the mistake of looking at this maybe a little bit too much. Generally, you're going to be okay if you follow the tips I've already given you. Settle early, settle often, get lots of production online. But also, I'd advise you to focus in on your weak spots. Founding a religion, creating masterpieces, for example, is a way that in this game I could pick up a lot of quick prestige. Maybe building some triumphs as well. And lastly, let's not forget about golden ages. These are very straightforward. You can always, by the way, monitor the progress of a golden age down in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and these will give you bonus prestige, 25%, 10 turns by default. Now, let's move into just a slight bonus tip because, oh my goodness, does it relate to this one well. When you're setting up a game, there's some obvious stuff that you might want to change. Difficulty. Lower it if the AI is too aggressive or the game's too hard. Increase it if you'd like more of a challenge and fewer bonuses. You can also increase the number of nations. I like to have a fairly cramped map, so that's the one I lean to. Turn limit might also be your thing if you don't want the game to drag on too long at the end, and crucially, outside of the other settings, you can get rid of human player culling, so those killer acts will never remove you from a game. Speaking of acts, let's also talk about the slightly related research and technological errors. There are many. First, moving through into the Bronze Age, hopefully fairly early on in the game, and toward the end you'll start to find some more modern technologies as well as far future ones. The key to understanding this is that there are 4 technological ages within each of the game's acts. Here in the Bronze Age, technology is obviously fairly straightforward, loads of good unlocks here, but you don't need to grab every tech because there'll be some that will have overlap. and other technologies will simply supersede, replace previous ones. So don't be afraid to skip some technologies to move through to the next technological era. That way you can quickly out-tech an opponent. Early buildings, of course, and crafting, such as the Apothecary, will be a wonderful addition. It not only provides a little bit of extra city health with its provided crafted amenity, I should say, but most importantly, it'll also give us a little bit of city knowledge. However, one big mistake and something I want to stress here, this is not direct research. This is not direct science. This is feeding into one of those quality of life values, the simulated values of the city. In this case, it should be fairly straightforward which one it's feeding into, right? It's feeding into knowledge. We can craft other things, of course, to boost up this knowledge, as well as just some general traits and other improvements that we might gather through the game. This will, obviously, impact your total amount of research, but it won't be like for like. Plus 10 knowledge may not be plus 10 research or plus 10 science. Finally, here in this section, don't forget to focus in on those paragons, who can craft prestige-producing masterpieces and provide generic benefits. These ones here, for example, providing knowledge to my capital and knowledge to cities. Game events and other random things here might also give you the little push you need. Fundamentally, don't forget that science, research is everything, as always. Moving through to the penultimate tip, combat basics, tactics, and deployment, and my goodness, don't make my embarrassing mistake here. On higher difficulties, the AI will be more likely to fight you, and when they do, you can of course mouse over their units to get a look at their overall combat strength, as well as their formation. Ara History Untold gives you many ways to manage your forces and open up the deployment panel, and here, couple of quick tips. You can deploy units one at a time and move them around. You can also change the formation, and that way you can deploy multiple units at the same time. Don't forget that they'll need a little bit of time, some in-game turns to muster before they actually appear on the map. You can also change their tactics. This may provide some additional bonuses like the one I'm about to apply here, but more broadly, you might also want to customize this a bit. Put your melee units at the front, projectile units at the back, because this is really your only chance to have strategic oversight on the combat. Otherwise, it's automatic, depending, of course, on where you've placed your units and where you're fighting. Everything else is just done by the game. So don't forget to muster your units appropriately and deploy them well. Finally, let's keep tabs on a couple of other little things that are very hidden inside of this game's UI, but are very important to you and I. Down the bottom right, you'll see banners and overlays. This will give you the kind of fundamental information right next to the orders that you've already queued up to pass through the next simultaneous turn. Here you can see yield, improvement, resources, and forces, and turn them on or off. They might not have a massive impact, but the overviews can be quite useful. The religious overview, roads, maybe less so, and finally hide borders if you'd like a clean map. However, there are some gameplay mechanics that we need to address here too. Diplomacy is tucked away up in the right here. You might need that from time to time. Maybe, maybe not, depends on your playstyle. You can check out your masterpieces, who's crafting, and whether you have empty slots. Your nation's inventory, what are you producing and how quickly? Crafting slots, make sure these are full. Oh my goodness, I left some of these empty for so long. Such an easy mistake to make in Ara History Untold. Finally, there'll be goals, and then jumping over to the left-hand side of the screen, you'll get your wonderful religious overview, which can be very powerful if you've grown a big population. And finally, you can change your government and tax rate at any time, upping your city cap potentially, changing your policy, and making you more money. Thank you so much for joining me in this Ara History Untold tips and tricks, kind of tutorial, beginner's guide video, a little bit of everything here. I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you next time.